I'd like to start with what is wonder. So the easiest way to figure out what a word means is just go to the dictionary, and so of course I did that. So wonder, a feeling of great surprise, or an admiration caused by seeing or experiencing something that is strange or new. So when you have this dictionary definition, it doesn't really tell you very much about what wonder is. If you've ever experienced wonder, this is a very flat thing in comparison to what you've experienced. And so instead, I'd like us to just take a clip of what I think maybe better encapsulates wonder.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I can hear your voice. Oh my gosh. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Okay, so what I realized, so I also have 4 children, and as I parented them, I realized that this was it. This is childhood, this is living, this is precious. And I became a steward of that in them to try to protect that at all costs in their experience. And hopefully also kind of model that in the way that I make time for that in my own career and life. So, scientist tools. How does a scientist understand something? Well, science is an important tool that usually starts with careful observation. And so I would say that the careful observation here would be just looking at your own experience. So I'd like everyone here to sit and think, when is the last time that you experienced wonder? Because you are your own kind of best subjective experience to that. So I would like you to connect with a neighbor. If you do not know anyone, please make a connection with someone sitting next to you. And we'll take about 2 minutes. And I'd like you to really think about what the thing was that you experienced, and then also, how did you identify it as wonder? So we'll take 2 minutes. At a 1 minute, I'll tell you to just swap if one person's been talking so that both people can talk, and we'll just listen to what someone else has to say. Let's come back together and we'll think about wonder communally again. What I have noticed this weekend is it's not hard to find these moments, and that the things I've heard today have brought me to tears a couple times just listening to other people's experiences of wonder. So I want to talk a little bit about the situations that cause awe. And a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about actually was work that's been done by Dr. Keltner at the University of California at Berkeley. And this is showing research from many cultures, 25, 26 cultures, finding that people find awe in the same 8 different places. So these are typically the moral beauty of others, collective movement, nature, visual design, music, spirituality, big ideas, and encountering the beginning and the end of life. So you might find that your wonder example fit in that, and you may find that it didn't, and that's perfectly okay too. I do want to tell you that research shows that beauty is the most frequent theme for self-reported awe, and that natural scenery is the most frequent trigger. Just so that you know, when you're looking for wonder in your life, those are easy places to start. All right, so when a scientist is trying to understand something, we've now talked about this idea of careful observation. But we need to have more than just our own experience in order to make it science. So we need more subjects to look at. We call your number of subjects the N number. So we want an N of greater than 1 so that we can understand this phenomenon for all humans, not just for one person. So we want to try to measure it in more than just one person. Measurement in science has to be done very carefully to make sure that you're measuring what you think you're measuring. And it's pretty hard to measure a subjective experience. So I'd like to use a couple of illustrations to show you how scientists go about trying to do this. So this is the awe experience scale. This was a scale that was created a couple of years ago to try to put numbers on these experiences so that we can actually do some statistics on them. So the instructions might say, rate your own wonder experience on a scale of 1 to 7 for each statement. And it would be strongly disagree with the statement would be a 1, all the way to 7 would be a strongly agree. And so these are 6 statements that I'd like you to just think of the wonder example that you came up with and kind of just score. Are you between a 1 or a 7 on each of them? So the first one, I sensed things momentarily slow down. I felt that my sense of self was diminished. I had the sense of being connected to everything. I felt in the presence of greatness. I felt my eyes widen. I felt challenged to understand the experience. So you might get a ballpark score of somewhere between 7 and 42. This is what the entire scale looks like. So they measure using about 5 statements for each of these sentence topics. And here are the ones that I pulled out for you to look at. These factors turn out to be 6 different factors that they say are components of awe. So the first one that they have here is time. So a sense of alteration in how time feels, and typically awe tends to slow things down. Self-loss is the second one. So this is a decrease in the perception that you have of yourself. Connectedness is the next one. So this is a deeper sense of connection with other people and with things. Vastness is the next factor. This is a feeling of expansiveness that's greater than yourself. Physiological, so there are certain facial expressions that come along with awe, like dropping your jaw, being astonished. And accommodation is the last one. Accommodation means changes to our mental schemas for how we thought that the world worked, or something that we thought to be true, and we're realizing maybe we need to change the way we're thinking about it. All right, so as a scientist, with our tools that we're bringing out here, we end up having to add another one. So once we observe and measure, we're also now trying to break this whole thing, a holistic experience, into its components, to measure it, but also to really understand it. So to tease these apart and then individually look at some of these things. So let me tell you about a study that was done where they took 1,000 tourists, and they either gave them a survey when they were at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, in the harbor area downtown, or at Yosemite. And what they did is they just gave them a survey about how much awe are you feeling. And they asked them to flip the paper over, and on the back, draw a picture of themselves. So these are the pictures. So you can see that there's a grid in the back. This is the one that was drawn. It's a representation randomly drawn from the ones of the tourists at the wharf. And you can see this is the drawing of me. The sun is the same in both sides. The grass is the same in both sides. But you can see a distinct, significant difference in how big the drawings are of self. So when the Fisherman Wharf tourists drew, they took up more squares. They literally went through and counted how many graph squares the body took up. But in the presence of Yosemite, much, much smaller. They also ask them, label me, so I know which one is you. The me is smaller in Yosemite compared to the me that's written in Fisherman's Wharf. This illustrates 2 things on these factors. The first is this idea of self-loss. So I think in our culture, we typically think of diminishment as self as being a bad thing. This is illustrating it's not necessarily a bad thing. So it can either be smaller body sense of your body self, or it can be like your subjective self. So physical or subjective. The second one is this idea of vastness. So vastness also, they can divide it into 2 components. One component of vastness is going to be like a perceiving something vast, like entering the Grand Canyon. And a second one is a contemplative version of this, like thinking about eternity and how big that it is. So these kinds of ego loss experiences, sometimes you'll see artists refer to ego loss. We call it small self in the science community, but it's referring to the same thing. And it's associated with a lot of really good things. So less self-focus, greater humility, greater forgiveness, more pro-social behaviors, more generosity, and what scientists like to call moral expansiveness. Okay, so changing in the way that we see ourselves are one thing, but also comes with this factor of physiological. So that means that things are actually happening in our physical body that are changing how we operate. So I'd like to talk about a couple of these. So first, all comes with things like maybe your eyes well up with tears, or maybe you get goosebumps or a sensation in the back of your neck. Perhaps you have skin conductance responses, or your pupil changes, whether it dilates or it gets more constricted. And anytime that you see some of these things that aren't really under our control, these are typically things that are in our autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is a branch of the nervous system that regulates our stress response and our relaxation response. And it's meant to be a balancing act. So it's meant to be like a teeter-totter here, where you have some rest and relaxation and some fight or flight in response to emergencies. We're supposed to be spending time in both of these realms. In our culture, we spend an awful lot of time in fight and flight. We're very stressed out a lot of the times, and a lot of the ER, the doctor visits, the just regular visits, any kind of issues that you have, I think I've seen a statistic upwards of 70% has some stress-related component to them. So when we need to be activated, we really want this autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic part of it on this side, to be activating. We want to be able to run away from the bear. We want to be able to have our pupils dilate so we can see everything that's coming. But when that's done, we also need to do the rest and relax. And this is the other half of this, the parasympathetic response. It kicks on so that we can finish digesting our lunch, and we can calm our heart rate back down and decrease our breathing rate again. So these responses can be mediated in part by this nerve called the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve that travels all throughout your internal organs. And it is a really interesting nerve because it allows us to regulate our breath and our heartbeat and other kinds of internal organ functions. But it also brings it's 90% of its job is just bringing information to the brain about what's happening in our gut. It brings in our gut responses to things. And wonder is a gut response. We're feeling it on this autonomic nervous system level. So during awe, we also know that different areas of your brain are activated than when we're not experiencing awe. So I'd like to talk for a minute about neurons so that you have a basis for the study I'm going to talk about in a second about brain activation. So we have neurons that are in our brains. They look kind of like this, like a tree, where information comes in at the top and it goes down and comes out through the bottom, like where the trunks would be. And what you can have then in the brain is these communication cells that line up together, and they can form what are basically communication pathways. And then these pathways can get very complicated. So every neuron connects to many, many, many other neurons. We have 86 billion neurons in our brains. And you end up getting these very extensive pathways that can be activated when you need to do certain things. So this is what we call a brain circuit. Now, the reason that that's important for your understanding of this experiment is I'd like to take you through how a different kind of scientist might ask and answer a question about wonder in the brain. So this is a study that was done looking at functional magnetic resonance imaging, so fMRI, which allows you to see the structures in the brain, but also which brain areas are active based on how much oxygen the neurons are using, because that's a good indicator that they're active. So what happens here is in this flow chart is you have this fMRI that subjects go in, and when they're in the fMRI machine, it's a very small space. You're in there tucked up, and they are giving you a video to watch. So if you pretend you're a subject, you'd go in there and they'd give you an instruction. They'll say, either you're about to watch a video, please just watch the video and be absorbed in it. Or they'll tell you, you're about to watch a video, and it's very important that you count the number of perspective changes that you see in that video. So you have a clear task, one way or the other. And then they showed these subjects a video. Now, there are 3 kinds of videos that they showed, and I have the examples here for you to see. So this first one is a neutral video. So this is not supposed to be positive or negative, just kind of nice, a neutral video. This next one is the awe videos. So these should inspire some awe in the participants. And then this last one is a positive control, where it's supposed to be cute, funny animals doing things, but maybe not so awe-inspiring, just pleasant, okay? So when you have this video showing, they're gonna just show you one at a time, and when it's done, they're gonna ask you to rate your awe. So just like you all did earlier, scale of 1 to 7, you're just gonna say, oh, that video was about a 6 for awe. All right, so what they found from this, and why I really like this study a lot, is because they showed differences in the brain based on the task that you're doing. And this makes sense. We're going to use different brain circuits to complete different activities, do different behaviors. The one over here on the left, these are the areas that had stronger activation when the subjects were told to just be immersed in the videos. When the subjects were told to count the perspective changes that the video took, then these brain areas were more active. So the first thing that I want you to see here is that it makes a difference what brain areas. These are circuits that we're activating based on what you're instructed to do. The second thing that's really interesting about this study is that the areas that are related to the default mode network, these were less strongly activated when the awe videos were playing. So the default mode network is a collection of brain regions that are activated when we're not really interacting with the outside world, when we are doing mind wandering, when we have no task that we're actively doing, but we're just kind of being in our own thought process. If you have ever had that voice inside your head that might talk to yourself or narrate what you're doing or say, no, no, don't go that way, go around the back of the building, you know that. That's your default mode network that's kicking on there. And sometimes it's really good to have the default mode network. Sometimes it has been shown that if you use it too much, that the rumination can start. So you start to obsessively kind of think about things or worry about things or have regrets about things. And so it's been shown that if we can do activities that decrease the activity of the default mode network, it is associated with less depression. And so this could be one of the ways that awe seems to be working, because awe is able to decrease the activation of this default mode network. And there are other things that do this as well, such as being in flow states or in deep meditative practices. Okay, so we're trying to break awe up into its components, take it apart, and it tells us a lot about what awe is. However, it can also tell us what awe is not. And I want to spend the next portion of the talk talking about this. So awe and wonder, I believe, are different. And we have shown some research establishing that awe can make you feel smaller. Wonder, on the other hand, can be related to perspective shifts to go both up or down. Okay, so awe makes you feel smaller. Wonder's more about taking this different perspective. So I'd like to watch this video. I don't think we're going to watch the whole thing, but at least half of it, to illustrate what I mean about a perspective shift. gonna go back in now. And I have physiological response. I just want to let you know, I have my goosebumps. So I love that video. I think it's just earth-shattering for your perspective. And I want to talk for a second about these perspective shifts. So this is coming at it from a perspective of complex living systems. So this is the idea that we all have these nested systems that are related to each other in ways that we might not always see, and that things often mirror each other from the humanity level of scale to the region, organizational, community, family level of scale, self level of scale, all the way down to the neural level of scale. And you see this when there's a problem in one of these, you see its ripple effects out. You also can see when one of these levels of scale has healing in a certain area, that will also trickle up or down. So when I first saw this video, it really struck me how I brought my own perspective to this and what I found. So everyone's gonna have seen different things that stood out to them. But for me, it was this depiction of these local superclusters in the cosmic web, 1 billion light years away. Because when I saw this picture, I immediately thought to myself of this picture that I've seen so many times underneath the microscope, because these are microtubule proteins within cells. And this is about probably 200 to 400 times closer than we can see with the naked eye. And you can see the same pattern of the proteins in the cytoplasm. It's got nuclear exclusion, but the absence of it in the nucleus looks just like that. And I think that's beautiful. And then I was, just last month, I was outside and I realized that I've done a lot of this. So this is a tracing of a neuron done by Ramon y Cajal, who was a Spanish neuroscientist who won the Nobel Prize. This was drawn by hand by him probably 125 years ago. But I've done a lot of this tracing under microscopes. A lot of my work is looking at the structure of the neurons and the branching. And I was in my backyard and looking up at a tulip poplar and saw the exact same thing. When was this? In April. And instead, now my perspective had shifted so much so that this seemed normal and this was amazing. And so it flipped completely just based on my own experience. And you may have been experiencing this weekend as macro wonder or micro wonder, which is the same kind of thing, just a different term for it. So the pattern or problem in the nested system will often repeat itself. Another difference between awe and wonder is that you can have such a thing as dark awe. Dark awe is terrifying. You can it's awe-inducing because you're afraid. So it can be a tornado coming toward you. It can be a lightning storm that came out of the blue. It can make you feel like life is fragile. Wonder, on the other hand, always brings joy. It's kind of the positive aspect of awe only. And here's my example for dark awe.
I'm going to be around long enough to tell anybody about us. Look at me, he's heading for that small moon. Think I can get him before he gets there. He's almost in range. That's how long. That's a space station. It could be a space nation. Great. It's a very exact feeling I'm black. Sure.
Okay, so perspective shift. Definitely some awe there, some accommodation. They're having to rethink this whole thing. Sure, there were physiological responses, but I wouldn't say it's wonder because they are not pleased. That's definitely dark awe. And the research suggests that a lot of awe experiences actually are dark awe, tinged with this fear or threat. So 10 to 15%. Okay, so we just saw that awe definitely requires a cognitive reframe, just as we saw Luke kind of doing. Wonder does the same thing. It makes it so that you have to accommodate and change your mental schema. But it's a little bit different from awe because it's always combined with curiosity and a sense of moving towards that which you are wondering about. So in this way, wonder can also be a verb. So When you wonder, you're asking yourself questions or expressing a wish to know about something. So we have known this before. We've had a lot of our neuroscience tools with this here, Mr. Rogers. Wonder always registers as learning. And we're just going to skip to this line.
The sky's the limit. Did you know? Did you know? Did you know when you wonder, you're learning? Did you know when you marvel, you're learning?
So we've known this for a while.
Wonderful, all kinds.
All right, so this is how we were built. Our brains are experience dependent. The reason that you are who you are is because everything that you've been exposed to has the capacity to change the synaptic connections between those neurons. And when that happens, you are building brain circuits. You're changing the ones that you have, you're building new ones. So the way that synaptic plasticity works is you have these sites called synapses on your neurons, and it's where the connection points are between them. If you repeatedly use a connection point like this one here, you're gonna keep it. You have this electricity coming in. That's something that is worth doing. You're doing it again and again. You're gonna maintain that connection. This one, maybe you used to do it, you're not doing it anymore, and over time you don't use it, and you're gonna lose it. It's gonna wither away. We are remarkable organisms in that we're not gonna give resources to something that it doesn't make sense for us to keep up. We're gonna be streamlined. So eventually, the things that you decide to keep, you'll end up bolstering those. You'll end up maybe having 2 connections there instead of just 1 because you're using it so much. And so in this way, we are very dynamic. And so we're having our environment change the actual neuroarchitecture of our brains, which is remarkable. So there are a lot of different ways that you can have synaptic plasticity show up with wonder and learning. So you can realize something. So this is truth or connection that perhaps you didn't know was there, and you didn't see it before, but you realize all of a sudden it's the truth, but it's a joyful truth. You can remember something. So it might be that you remember something about yourself, and your connection to other people. And what's interesting about that with wonder is these remembering moments often supersede the story that we tell ourselves about what is true. And that links back to that default mode network in your head. Being curious about something is another way where wonder shows up, and that also involves synaptic plasticity. This is where we're leaning forward into something in an open, joyful way without being coerced. It's a really interesting thing about wonder is it's similar to creativity and empathy, where these are amazing human states, but they're very easily crushed, and you cannot force them on anybody. If anyone's ever looked at you and said, be creative right now, like all of a sudden, all creativity that you ever had just goes out the window. And it's the same, you can't force someone to wonder, right? And the last way that wonder is really what we were built for is that it has a shift in consciousness that happens. When you're in wonder, you have a change in awareness. You are in the present moment. And in that way, wonder again is similar to empathy, and it's similar to creativity. They're easy to crush, and they may take work to make space for these things once we stop engaging with them in the way that we did when we were young children. So awe can be a connection. That was one of the factors on there. It is usually an external connection. So we see something beautiful in someone else. We see visual art that's amazing, or we see nature that really connects with us, but it's a sensory experience. Whereas wonder is more about a connection to yourself. So with that, when you have this connection to yourself, we are drawn to knowing about ourselves really more than anything else out there. Everyone's so curious about who you are. We are by design rather self-centered in that is, we are our first mystery, right? We're intrigued by who we are. We're always trying to find our passion or figure out what we were meant to do so that we can have that feeling of peace and satisfaction that we are being who we are and that we're living this aligned life. Awe is defined in the literature as being a complex emotion, but I am making this rather theoretical argument here that wonder actually is not an emotion, but it is a state of being, which is different. So wonder is bringing this connection to self, and it doesn't necessarily depend on anything happening in the external environment at all. And the reason that this is important is that if this is true, then that means that you don't need to go seek wonder anywhere. You don't need to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Wonder is here right now in the everyday and within ourselves, which is amazing how accessible that it could be. So the title of the talk is that we were built for wonder, and I'd like to show you the reason I think that that's true. So the different aspects of ourselves, we've got our emotional selves where wonder shows up perhaps as awe or positive emotions that come from awe. But those are all, emotions are physiological responses to our external world. These physical responses show up in the autonomic nervous system. It comes when we're absorbed completely in what we're doing. Our energy levels might be higher when we're in wonder. It has a cognitive aspect to it where we're learning with meaning. We have synaptic plasticity. We're making changes to the default mode network. And then also we have this consciousness element to it where we have these elements of timelessness, where we have changes in awareness, and where we may be able to even transcend the mind's narrative. When this happens, we have all of these four bodies that we own that are us, they're all in alignment. Wonder brings them all into line. And when you are in alignment, you're at peace. It allows us to be less stressed out, more present, and this leads us to the idea that wonder can be used as a tool for well-being. Lots of studies have shown that awe has distinct benefits: increased helping behaviors, pro-social behaviors, increased cardiovascular health and longevity, increased purpose and meaning, an expanded sense of time, decreases in aggressive attitudes, decreased headaches, sleep issues, body and stomach aches, and importantly, decreased stress, anxiety, and depression. All these together are huge indicators that awe is associated with emotional, social, and psychological well-being. And many of these studies are correlations, meaning that when you have somebody who has increased sense of purpose and meaning, they are likely to also have a greater tendency to experience awe. So with correlational data, you can immerse in these, and then you have a greater likelihood of also being in awe more frequently. All right, so the last way that I'm going to talk about as a scientist as to how we can understand something is in science, one of the tools we do is we knock it out. We dismantle it, we lesion it, and we see what happens. And we do this particularly when it comes to the brain. So we have inadvertently done this in our culture right now. We are living in a culture with a wonder deficit. This is through no fault of our own. It is just collectively the way that we're living our lives. So there's a couple of reasons for that. It's really important what culture values. So whatever is acceptable and valued in our culture, we're more likely to do. Over time, what this means is that we've lost, as Abraham Maslow described, the capacity to appreciate again and again, freshly and naively, the basic goods of life. Another way is being too busy. So we are always having a to-do list. When we do have downtime, are often on social media, or we're tending to the needs of others, or we're watching TV, all of which doesn't really leave time for active rest. Your personal narrative is really important because the way that we talk to ourselves and the stories that we tell ourselves can have a big impact on our ability to be present and to seek out wonder. Not being open. So when they looked at the personality factors that are associated with the tendency to be in awe, the one that was the most associated with it was the openness to new experience. So that's something that we can actively look at as well. The default network has a way of having these voices that have us have regret or that keep us worrying about the future, which prevents us from being present. And I would like you to know how important your focused attention is to your well-being. So I would like us to do this focused attention task where you just look and see how many passes does the white team make?
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13.
13?
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Now, this was an ad campaign that was done for Transport for London to try to raise awareness about cyclists on the road. And it went viral about 15 years ago, and the traffic fatalities for cyclists fell by 1/3 that year, which is incredible. So looking for something makes you find it, right? This is called inattentional blindness, when people don't see what they're not looking for. And I would also like to just make this comment. Do you remember the task with the fMRI? And they ask subjects to either count perspective changes in the videos or just be absorbed. It makes a difference. The task that you are paying attention to is going to change your ability to experience awe. So looking for it is something that really needs to be part of our daily life if we expect to be able to see it. Okay, so wonder must be allowed. It's not something that you can go and claim or get or conquer. You can't attain it. You just have to allow it. And there's a couple of ways that we can work towards this. There are two big things that happen, the two biggest ways of getting more wonder in our lives. One on the left, mindfulness. The one on the right, openness. And I'll just talk for a moment about both of those. So with mindfulness here, being present is being mindful. So mindfulness is being right here, right now, without judgment. That last part's important because if you don't have that judgment piece offline, your default mode network's gonna come in and start narrating everything. So you just need to be present and to allow. So another way here to look at this is you need to have rest and reflection. You can't be doing all the time. There's a lot of ways to rest other than just not working. You know, there's spiritual rest, there's creative rest, there's play. There's active rest where you go into meditation and you're still, but your mind is still, you're still you. It's not even necessarily your mind, but your core is still there and resting. Quieting the inner voice. Any activity that you can do in your life that makes that voice be quiet, any flow state that you can access, anytime you're doing an activity that makes you lose track of time, that is what you want to do more of. I would like to tell everyone in this room that you are perfect exactly the way that you are. You were born whole, you are still whole, and there is nothing that you need to do to make yourself better other than just be here, be present with the beautiful self that you are right here. Be open. So being open-minded, we talked about that as a personality trait. I also want to tell you that personality is not static. Personality changes. There was this amazing study I found a couple of years ago that did a study of personality where people took personality tests at age 14 and again at age 77. And what was interesting about this study is that it was unrecognizable. You couldn't go back and see who was who. Personalities change a lot, and it's kind of one of these urban legends or myths that personality is not changeable. It certainly is, and this openness to experience is something that we can work on every day. One of the beautiful things about being human is this idea of synaptic plasticity. We can unlearn things whenever we want to. It's not the easiest thing, but we can do it. And AI is actually very, very bad at unlearning things. So we have a leg up there on AI. Curiosity is the last thing here. So when you are trying to learn to do things in a different way, to be open and be present, it's really important just to be your own personal scientist. You want to see and explore what works. Try a tool, see if it works. If it doesn't work, put it aside. Maybe come back to it in 6 months or a year and try something else and see what does work. Journaling and reflecting on this process is a wonderful way to see if it's working for you or not. So can wonder be taught? Sort of. It is our natural state of being. And in some ways, we're just kind of pulling things off to get to the scaffolding that was already there to begin with. All right, so here are some ideas that I have about how to cultivate wonder in your life. Really, they just all are intentionally focusing, being aware of mindfulness and of openness. Some of these things might work great for you. These things worked for me. A lot of these have peer-reviewed studies behind them, not all of them. And I would encourage you to maybe do some of these, maybe do some of your own, but do it more than once. Try to commit to doing it for 5 days or 7 days before you discard it and see what impact that it has. And like a good scientist, maybe don't do like 10 at once because you're gonna get burnt out. You're not gonna know which one works, but maybe just try one for 5 days in a row and journal and see how it goes. Okay, so this is a Rachel Carson quote, which I love that it's actually in the literature for the Ringling through no collaboration of mine, but it's a beautiful quote. She's also a scientist. One way to open your eyes to unnoticed beauty is to ask yourself, be present here. What if I had never seen this before? What if I knew I would never see it again? So this is where we are right here if we lived on Pangaea. So Pangaea is one continent before it broke apart. This is probably 260 million years ago. And I put a little pin where we are here in Florida so you can orient appropriately. So over time, what happens is we are born as Pangaea, and over time we have this tectonic drift that happens. This could be due to life events or just cultural conditioning. And we feel out of alignment because of it, because of the way that we think things should be. And over time, this can get bigger than what we originally were. Wonder is a tool that can allow us to recognize the truth of our own wholeness. It's a tool that can bring all of our parts together, our physical, our emotional, our cognitive, our spiritual consciousness into alignment. And in that way, it can move us away from disconnection. And we can start to perceive ourselves as whole again. Wonder is a present and open realization about your own wholeness. And I would like to leave you with some amazing books if you want to do some further reading. So this is my book about how to cultivate empathy and creativity. The reason I'm saying it might be a good resource is because I go into a great deal of detail on how to cultivate openness and how to cultivate being present and mindful. The second one is this Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood book, When You Wonder, We're Learning, where they take lessons from that show, which is a really amazing way to think about learning. This Blue Zones book, so this is about pockets geographically here in the world that are associated with greater well-being and longevity. So if you're interested in that, I would look there. The Dacher Keltner's pop book, Awe, this came out in, I believe, 2023. That is a wonderful resource to get more in-depth on some of the studies I've talked about. Michael Singer wrote the Surrender Experiment. So this talks a little bit more about the voice inside your head and how we can be more aware of that and release some control. Thich Nhat Hanh, The Miracle of Mindfulness. This is a beautiful exploration about being mindful. Rachel Carson's The Sense of Wonder. This is an exploration of nature with children. And then the Wonder Approach by Catherine Lecouer. My French isn't amazing, but this is a wonderful exploration of how we can teach children in a joyful way to not crush their sense of wonder. And I would also just like to say thank you so much to Ames for the introduction and letting me know about this amazing symposium, and to the Ringling itself for putting this on and making this a priority with resources and time and energy so that it becomes more of our part of the dialogue about well-being in a way that's really needed in our society right now. I would like to leave you with this song. And I would love to have any questions if we have time for them.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Yeah. I would love to see that slide again that had the 9 things, if we could. But the other question I had was back from the beginning when you said there was more forgiveness.
Yes.
I was just curious how, thank you so much. Detachment, so that's okay. How this plays into forgiveness. I wasn't quite seeing that connection. Thank you.
So this is the moral expansiveness that they're speaking of. So when you have more awe, it's correlated with people acting in a more empathetic way. So more pro-social behavior, more accepting of others, and forgiveness is an element of that. So there was a paper that I found that talked about forgiveness and the moral expansiveness. It's also associated with gratitude and a lot of other things like the sharing, comforting, helping behaviors. So when the tendency to experience awe is higher, those things also tend to be higher.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Is there a risk in being bombarded by too much wonder?
What an amazing question. Is there a risk in being bombarded by too much wonder? The thing that I've realized about wonder, and this is why I think it's such a good tool for well-being, is I don't think that there is a tolerance for wonder the way there is for a drug. So I think that if you are able to really be freshly in that moment naively and experience it with open-mindedness, I think that wonder will work every time. I mean, there's not a scientific study that I know on that, but I do know when I've talked about this in my college classes and we have discussions about it, the general consensus with the students is that there's not a tolerance effect, that it's not something that goes away. Like if you're laughing again and again and again, you get tired of laughing and you're just done and it's not funny anymore. But with wonder, it doesn't seem to be that way because you have to be present in that moment to experience it in the first place. So I guess we could kind of get detached from it, but it feels to me like because it is a state of being, not an emotion that we're having, it is being ourselves. And I don't think we can ever be ourselves too much.
Oh, good. And we have another question here.
If a young person has experienced some short-term memory loss, then the experience of awe or wonder dissipates almost immediately. How do you work with that for them to hold on to it? Or can you?
If they have short-term memory loss? I guess in that situation, you mean they wouldn't remember what caused the awe in the first place?
Perhaps, or even the experience of it. I'm not sure.
So like a traumatic response where they don't remember the past?
Yeah, but there's just no ability to recall experience. Can experience of the moment, but then it dissipates.
Well, I would say that one good thing about wonder is that because it relies on the present moment, it doesn't necessarily tap into anything in the past. And I feel like our memories of the past actually impede our wonder, openness. And so if you didn't have memories, you probably would be a lot more likely to experience awe because you wouldn't come in with your own prejudices about what a situation should or shouldn't be. You'd probably be more open. And if you were in a situation where you were experiencing awe and it was pleasant, I think you could just focus on the physiological effects. And a lot of times what's interesting about memory is you might not remember specific cognitive facts, but you remember how you feel. Always we remember how we feel. And because you feel wonder in your body, this is something that probably is going to feel good even if you don't remember exactly why it was feeling good.
Thanks for the talk. And you talked about monitoring wonder and identifying the regions of the brain involved in it. Are there studies about stimulating those regions of the brain for therapeutic purposes and maybe even psychological therapy to create openness in a person against their own will?
Do you have someone in mind, Glenn? Well, one of the good things about this is we're reducing activation, right? So you probably aren't going to be able to stimulate it. We're trying to get people to be calm and be still and be present. And that makes the busy chatter go away, hopefully. An interesting aspect of that is sometimes when we're calm and still, the first thing that happens is that voice gets real loud. So sometimes that means we have our own work to do to kind of sort through that. Wonder in itself is just starting to be explored. So I would say the last 10 years have done a lot for the exploration of awe. We have mostly correlation. So when this is high, this is also awe tendency. When this is low, oh, this person also experiences a lot of awe. We're just now trying to figure out what wonder looks like, how it's different, how it's the same. So I don't know of any states that you can stimulate. I do know that one of the things that can also make the default mode network be quiet is psychedelics. So it might be that the future of an exploration of wonder and awe might have something to do with how we can use psychedelics to make these more spiritual, transformative experiences in ways that have awe-inspiring events that are mediated by a clinician in a safe setting that then may actually change outlook in a more permanent way, which is a really interesting area of research that's been going on right now.
So you talked a lot about when people have the voice in their head that narrates. What about for people who don't have that voice that is constantly narrating? Do they experience wonder in a different way?
That is such an intriguing question, and actually, yet not everybody has this voice, and the voice is sometimes louder or quieter, and in some ways that's a gift, so if that doesn't happen to you, it's kind of amazing. But I would also say that I'm not saying that that voice is bad and something that needs to be quiet, because it also does other things. So even if you don't have a voice, we have the ability to daydream. We have the ability to mentalize, to take other people's perspectives, to talk through things, to have goal-directed behavior, to time travel, future and past. And those are the things that when I'm saying voice, I mean these qualities that as humans we do. Sometimes we do those things to our detriment of the present moment.
All right, well, thank you. If everyone could please join me once more in thanking Dr. Erin Clabough.
Thank you.